there's a lot to unpack with this because I feel like it's one of the most overlooked parts. We know about toxins in general, like heavy metals and things, but we don't usually dive into things like synthetic dyes, things that literally color foods and so many other additives. But I want to hear, starting with your story, going back to how you even got involved in this and what your personal journey was like to get to actually making a film.
Yeah, so we are obviously married and we have two children. And our oldest, between the ages of 1 and 3, he was really having some concerning behaviors. Some days were fine, and then some days, well, most days were really, really bad. And so it was the hitting and the fits and the biting and the emotional dysregulation and a lot of that between the ages of 1 and 3 can be completely normal. And so we were wavering back and forth between, is this normal toddler behavior or is there something wrong? And so where we kind of drew a line in the sand and decided that we might need to start trying to figure out how to help him is when at his mother's morning out, which is like a half day daycare. And so he would go 2 or 3 days a week just for like 2.5 hours. And in that 2.5 hours, we would have several write-ups. Some days I would have to come and pick him up. And the same thing was happening in every area of our life between church and play dates. And so it was really becoming an issue. And so we decided to consult doctors and therapists and do all the things, and nothing seemed like it worked. We blamed it on teething, of which the doctor suggested to give him Tylenol before he went to his mother's morning out, which was brightly colored red. And so we decided to do an elimination diet on kind of on a whim. And I found an article that suggested eliminating wheat, dairy, and synthetic dyes. And within 48 hours, we saw that easygoing child that we would occasionally see for like 30 days straight following that like initial 48-hour detox-ish period. And so we knew that something he was eating was bothering him and was significantly impacting him. So after the 30 days, we decided to reintroduce wheat and we saw no effect. And then we decided to reintroduce dairy and we saw no effect. And then we tried to reintroduce synthetic dyes. And within 15 minutes, all of those behaviors came flooding back, the hitting, the biting, the emotional dysregulation. And so we knew synthetic dyes was his culprit. And since then, he's had, such a success story. He's doing so well. And so it was really kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde turnaround for us. We like to say synthetic dyes eliminated like 98% of his issues. And the other 2%, he was able to slow down and we could talk through things and work through things. And there was so much growth. And, now he's doing so well. He's in public school and we haven't had a single day where he's hit or bit or had a meltdown or cried. He's just a normal, easygoing, very smart, very talented and gifted child. And so we were really, looking at his progress and we were like, how can something he eat so irregularly at that? The only times he was consuming synthetic dyes regularly was through his daily allergy medicine or Tylenol or prescription medication, which before he had tubes, he had chronic ear infections. So that year he had 6, 7, maybe even 8 antibiotics for ear infections. And so he kind of was on this Rev 40 loop. Just with medication, because when we went through our cabinets, we'd already kind of leaned toward organic foods. We just didn't think about medication. And so he wasn't getting the brightly colorful cereal. So we were really shocked that such a small amount of synthetic dyes could dramatically impact his sleep and emotional regulation. And so I started trying to dig into the research. My background is in education, so all the scientific jargon was very confusing to me. And so I really wanted to ask my questions and try to get to the bottom of what are synthetic dyes doing to us and how could synthetic dyes be impacting our child in such a traumatic way or dramatic way. And so I decided to ask Brandon if he wanted to document our journey to travel to ask these world's leading researchers the questions I have, along with interviewing some moms about their story. And he agreed.
She
Reluctantly.
she's kind of skipped a little bit of there. Obviously, like we did a podcast yesterday, and I said we were very like optimistically, or like how did I word it yesterday? We were like
Optimistically naive.
naively optimistic is what it was. Like the fact that we thought maybe we could interview researchers. Maybe they actually would want to talk to us. Like looking back now, it's kind of crazy that we actually figured out a way to make that happen. And I don't really give us the credit. We feel like God opened a whole lot of doors for us and made that possible. But yeah, she came to me with the idea of doing a documentary and trying to interview this people. And I was a little reluctant at first. And I'll be honest, if I would have known then the amount of work that we would have had to put
And
into
money.
making the film, yeah, I don't know that I would have said yes. But luckily, once again, we were kind of naive and optimistic, and I had seen such a dramatic shift in our son, and like thinking about like what his life would look like if we hadn't figured this out, and how many people out there could have similar stories and not know that synthetic dyes could potentially be the culprit to their child's behavior issues and things like that. Kind of felt like we didn't really have a choice. Like we had to do it.
We felt called to do it. And like even digging into, we started a Facebook group because I just really wanted a community that we could talk about all things dyes and swaps. And it quickly in 2 years grew from 0 to, what are we at?
770,000.
770,000 people. So we've heard thousands and thousands and thousands of stories of life change from removing synthetic dyes. And then even since now that our documentary, To Die for the Documentary, has now come out, we're now hearing stories of people who have since seen the documentary and now they're starting to see change in their child, which is obviously why we've done it. But we initially kind of thought it was going to be like a kind of a rare reaction, which I mean, in the grand scheme of things, a reaction as dramatic as our son's is probably relatively rare, but we still have heard thousands and thousands of stories of families that are very similar to ours, and synthetic dyes were 100% their culprit. Whereas some families, you may have some underlying issue, and then synthetic dyes are, of course, taking you into the problem area. But for us, like that was the only issue that he had, and it felt like a miracle and kind of a golden ticket that we wanted to share with everyone.
Yeah, it seems like these types of stories you hear all the time, right? Children acting out these days, having, developmental issues, just behavioral issues has become very common, right? I know this. My niece and nephew are in school. I see my friends with kids like, and you hear about it. This wasn't what it was 20, 30 years ago. Obviously, something is there. A lot of the doctors will say, well, it's, more chemicals in general. It's the diagnostics have gotten much better. We have now the drugs to solve this problem, right?